and you transform your career, business, life, and relationships. This is the Growth to Freedom Show. Now, here is your host, Dan Kuschell.
Welcome to growthtofreedom.com, the show that helps you transform your life, business, and relationships. I'm Dan Kuschell. Thanks for making us part of your day. We've got a great show today. I mean, have you ever wanted to sit down with someone who may be an Olympic superstar, worked with world-class athletes, world-class executives? Well, today's show is going to give you and I an opportunity to do just that. We've got Dr. Jeff Spencer, who was an Olympic cyclist in the 1972 Olympics. He's worked with athletes like Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong. Wait, don't hold that against him, by the way. He's also worked with a lot of executives, coaches, and he's been the Conerman to a lot of success around the world. And we're going to pick his brain today to share with you the Champions Blueprint. We're going to talk about 3 things champions do and a whole lot more. Now, all of our guests are presented by Genius Network, and our guests made available through the Genius Network hotline. We'd love to connect with you. You can join us on Twitter at Dan Kuschell, Dan_Kuschell, or email us at info@growthtofreedom.com. That's info@growthtofreedom.com. Now, we're going to dive into it to give you more clarity, confidence, and direction. Oh, one last thing. Stay tuned, because in a little bit, we're going to tell you how to get your very own free Growth to Freedom gift package, compliments of the show, as well as Dr. Jeff Spencer. And today we're going to be talking about the Champions Blueprint. Think about it. Have you ever wondered why some people have success while others seem to struggle to get by, or maybe the things that we do aren't really giving us the joy, the passion? Well, Dr. Jeff Spencer is someone who spent a lifetime, not only in sports, working with world-class athletes, but also executives. And he talks about the difference. And he's got a well-rounded program that we're going to dive into right now. Dr. Jeff Spencer, I'd like to welcome you to the show. How are you today?
Well, thanks, Dan. It's always a pleasure and ready to roll.
Awesome. Well, we'll dive right into it, because I know you've got a wealth of information. But before we dive into the Champions Blueprint, here's what I'd love to ask Dr. Spencer. Who is Dr. Jeff Spencer?
Well, Dr. Jeff Spencer, actually, by definition, is a cornerman, and I'm someone who's passionate about helping people achieve the readiness to be able to capitalize on the 3 to 5 moments that'll make or break a career every year. And that's basically my rampage, and that's what my life's dedicated to, Dan.
And not only have you done that with athletes and executives, but you also got started as an athlete yourself. Why don't you talk, because it was fascinating as we got a chance to meet through Joe Polish and Genius Network, and hearing your story about, basically rising up, so to speak, against all odds, being an overachiever, and ultimately riding in the 1972 Olympic team as a cyclist. Why don't you tell a little bit about your journey?
Well, it's an interesting story. When I was a kid, I was about 7 years old. I'd get up every morning around 5 a.m. when it was dark, and I'd go outside and hit my little baseball up and down the street by myself, thinking about that's all I could think about. And I thought the coolest thing ever would be to march into an Olympic stadium. And I was an Olympic team member. But one of the things I observed, Dan, was that the biggest and the baddest in sports didn't always win, and they didn't win gold medals. And the guys on paper that should didn't. So I kind of kept that in mind, and I wondered about that curiosity. And then after competing in my first national championship when I was 13, my dad, who is literally an artistic design genius, he and my mom divorced, and that was the last time I saw my dad. And I found out 30 years later that my dad died homeless on the streets of New York City, and that was another piece of the puzzle. It was dispelling the myth that will, talent, technique, and technology are going to save you and get you to the promised land, because if that were the case, my dad would have gotten there long before the others, and he didn't. He became a statistic rather than what he could have been. And silver lining to that very dark cloud was that I had just amazing mentors come into my life and shared with me their secrets on how they became iconic. And I saw, again, the pattern where they didn't have the best pedigree, but they were always first in line to grab the brass ring while the others scratched their heads with the better pedigrees. So I realized that they knew something about life and themselves that the others didn't. And those secrets that they passed on to me that I applied actually did enable me to make an Olympic team. I also went to University of Southern California on an educational opportunity grant and got my master's degree in sports science. So it was really their contribution through my mentors that gave me the skills to be able to craft a strategy and a repeatable process by which people can get to the top of their game and stay there.
Well, speaking of being at the top of their game and staying there, was something you said. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in what you shared as far as your beginning. You certainly weren't, someone who was brought up with a gold, silver spoon. Or I don't know if you can have a gold, silver spoon, actually, right, Dr. Spencer?
Well, in today's world, everything's possible, I guess.
That's right. But what you shared is you had mentors
right.
who said, how can I be iconic?
Yes.
They weren't saying, how can I get by? How can I be even above average? But how can I be iconic? So talk about the mindset as it relates to that one simple nugget right there.
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to be an exponential thinker that can think outside the box, and you have to practice the skill of developing uncensored possibility achievement. And they certainly understand that there's two sides to our human nature. There's the human nature side that makes fear-based decisions and plays in the world of safety. And if you're going to play in the world of safety where you ask and make all your decisions out of what you stand not to lose, then prepare to have a second-rate life and prepare to be a statistic that is characterized by a life of mediocrity, and the very best you're going to be a one-act wonder. But then we also have a champion nature side to us that we don't really talk about much. But the champion's nature, we have an impassioned desire, every one of us, to be able to create a life of distinction and meaning. And the reason why I say that is that I've never met a person that could wait to get up and fail. I've never seen that. So this champion nature is always at war with that other nature that wants to make us think small. And so the people that discover that, they always make their decisions on what they stand to gain, not what they stand to lose. And as a result of that, peak performance becomes the rule of their life. And they're able to remain stable in adversity. They're able to adapt to any set of conditions, and they're actually able to create sustainability in their peak performance, and that's how they create their lives of distinction.
That's fantastic. Now, speaking of a life of distinction, a life of meaning, what would you say for Dr. Jeff Spencer has been the turning point for you? If you had to narrow it all down, looking back over the years, your success, your failures, or as Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach calls it, as you know, he calls it extreme market research instead of failure. What would you say that for you has been that one key element, if you could narrow it down to one main thing that's allowed you to achieve the success that you have?
Well, I'll relate it to an experience I had with my mentor. When I was 18 years old, when my parents got divorced, we went on welfare, and I became the father, so to speak, and it just about killed me, the stress of having to inherit that role. But, the point I want to make here is that I was having a very bad day when I was 18, and my mentor looked at me and said, well, you're having a bad day, aren't you? And I said, well, I haven't had very many good ones. And he said, would you like a helping hand? And I said to myself, oh, my God, how did this guy read my mind? And I looked and I said, if there was ever a day to ask me if I would like a helping hand, today's the day. And I absolutely 100% I'd love a helping hand. And he looked at me with these steely blue eyes, and he said, well, if you want a helping hand, you got one at the end of each arm. And he turned around and walked out of the room. And so I sat there, and I realized that he was absolutely right, and that he cared enough about me not to intervene in my finding my resourcefulness within myself to be able to figure out a way beyond where I was to be able to chart a path to my greater future. And that was for sure my life-defining moment.
Wow. So he literally said that, walked out of the room,
yeah.
And to a degree left you there,
yeah.
knowing that inside of you was this champion.
That's right.
This champion's blueprint. And when we come back after the break, Dr. Spencer, I'd love for you to dive in to talk about what is the champion's blueprint. I'd love for you to share, maybe the 3 things that you have found that champions do. Heck, I'd love for you to share who your favorite athlete between Tiger Woods and Lance. No, I wouldn't put you on the spot like that, of course, but that certainly would be intriguing, as well as a whole lot more coming up right after this. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com, the show that helps you transform your life, business, and relationships. To summarize the first segment of the show, we've got Dr. Jeff Spencer. He's been the cornerman for some of the top athletes in the world, executives, and he can help you transform your business, your career, and what he calls the champion's blueprint. He was sharing about how you can be iconic and why that's far more important than shooting for just to being mediocre, the difference of and the distinction of meaning and making a difference versus the safety net that some of us have a tendency to adapt to, and that turning point for him that really made the difference working with his mentor. Now, Dr. Spencer, I'd love for you to share. Can you share with everybody, why did you create the Champion's Blueprint in the first place?
Well, as I said, my father was a genius, and I've seen, and you've seen, and everybody's seen geniuses, whether it's sports, business, on stage, or in life, that have immense talent, they have immense will, they have superior technique and technology, but yet they fail. Well, so why is that?
Yep.
I mean, the things that should deliver don't, and that's with such consistency that it can't be an accident. And when I look at my father and I look at the people that can and should but can and don't, they're basically missing three things. Number one, no one wins alone. They don't have a team that can do for them what they can't do for themselves. And number two, they don't have a blueprint. They don't have a roadmap. They don't have a structure that responsibly holds their dream to usher it through through life's minefield to manifestation. And you just can't make this up. I mean, success is not an accident. It's a very purposeful outcome of very deliberate actions consistently applied, and everybody needs a proven blueprint. And then thirdly, we need advisors, and to me, coaches are important, mentors are important, but the most important person on your team in terms of the advisor is what I call the cornerman. And without those three things, it's almost impossible to be able to create a life of extraordinary distinction.
Awesome. And so you said it's about team, it's about having the
Absolutely.
blueprint and the structure,
Yep.
and then advisors and coaches. Now, speaking of cornerman, I mean, that's a new term. The first time I heard it was you.
Yep.
So, that automatically makes you uniquely different
Yep.
and differentiated in the marketing. But so what is a cornerman? What does a cornerman do for people like, well, the great people you've worked with over the years?
Well, I think let's take a great example. Let's look at Rocky. Rocky was an obscure fighter, but yet came into prominence and became a perennial champion and an icon. Why? He didn't create that. He had somebody craft it for him, which was his cornerman, Mickey. Mickey was this older guy that had scar tissue that had been around the block a million times.
Rocco!
Yeah, he could, read patterns in real time. He knew what to do. He was always there. He wasn't just a specialist in one technique like a coach or a mentor. He was a champion in terms of the whole, and he knew exactly what to do at any moment to be able to carry Rocky's momentum forward so he could connect with his genius. So a cornerman is that guy that's always there. He's a guy that's interested in principles and patterns, not just goal achievement. He's there over the long term in real time. He knows exactly what to do to be able to carry momentum forward, and if he needs to act as a cornerman to close the cuts and put some ice on the bruises, well, he's there to be able to do that as well. And in my view, everybody needs a cornerman, and that's the missing link. You need a specialist in a person's universe more than just a specialist in an individual part. That's the cornerman.
Well, that's a great way to look at it. So as you talk about that, what popped up for me is, a specialist in many ways, anybody can be great when it's great or when it's sunny outside. In other words, it's easy to be a sunny day kind of guy or a sunny day kind of person when it's sunny out. But show me the person who can be, have sunshine when they got knocked down, they got their butt whooped, right? And so what I think I hear you saying is a cornerman takes it deeper. They're not only to specialize and plan for success when things are great, but they're also there to help, number one, steer away from the pitfalls, but realize there can be pitfalls, and they're there to pick up that champion up and be able to build it and grow it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, there's actually four parts to this, and this is like the champion's modus operandi. First off, a cornerman will say, okay, Dan, you are here, meaning that we can put a name on where you are in the process. And since we can put a name on it, we can then ask the second question, is there danger here? And if there's danger here, the third question is, what are the one or two things that have to happen right now to be able to carry momentum forward? And then the fourth thing is, okay, Dan, since we got our momentum back and we're moving forward, what do we know and what do we need to know about what's around the corner so we can circumvent the punch that we don't see that's coming that's going to take us out if we don't know that it's there? So the cornerman not only knows what to do now in the simplest form, but he also knows what's coming so you can avoid the pothole that preventably takes most people out of the game.
That's awesome. So cornerman knows what's happening now and what's coming. He identifies the four key areas. Let me see if I've got them right. Number one, identifies that you're here, wherever that is.
Yep.
Number two is what dangers are here. Number three, what has to happen in order for us to move forward. And fourth is what do we need to know that we aren't anticipating that may be around the corner. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So what that is, that's the distinction. It's like most people look at life through the eyes of a GPS. They know where their destination is, and they know where their starting point is, and the map is provided to them. The map in this instance might be a business plan, which is great, But a cornerman looks at it differently. He doesn't look at the gap as being a void. He looks at the gap as being an active living space that requires readiness. So what he does, he creates the readiness to be able to make the pivotal decisions in those key moments that are going to make the difference between an average life and an extraordinary life.
An ordinary life and an extraordinary life. And here, as you're watching right now or you're listening right now, here's what I propose to you is you deserve it. You deserve the very best. You are a champion. You are a winner. And Jeff can show you how to transform where you are today to where you want to go. And, on your website, Dr. Spencer, you talk about the 3 things that champions do. What are those 3 things, and what can our viewers and listeners start putting into play right now to be able to adapt the principles of the champion blueprint?
Well, the key thing that every champion does, number one, they never try to fight the battle alone, because nobody has enough time and enough experience and enough energy to go through 50 years of flogging to be able to understand the process, to be able to move forward. That's where they have their advisors, they have their coaches, and they have their mentors that are specialists in certain areas. Then they have their cornerman that sees the bigger picture, that can guide them into the future because he actually is clairvoyant and can see what's coming and know how to steer around it.
So speaking of that, so there's this misconception, that we have to be fighting or thinking about that most people might be fighting up against, right? I mean, there's been a lot of training that we've had, over 14,000 hours of school training from the time we were in preschool to the time we were in high school, maybe some college on top of that, in your case, as a PhD and a doctor, many hours of training that says if you want something done right, you've got to go do it yourself, right?
Yeah,
what you're saying is a little bit different. In fact, it's very different, is that building a life, building success, building a champion is a team sport. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, nobody wins alone. It's not possible. Nobody knows enough. Nobody has enough experience to be able to make that happen. And in order to gain the acceleration that's necessary to be able to, escape the gravity, to be able to create altitude, to create a life of distinction, you absolutely have to have people that are expert in the areas that you're not, that you absolutely need to have on your corner to be able to get that level of altitude. There's absolutely no question about that. And another myth that I'd like to explode, too, is really the whole myth of if you dream big enough and then you want it bad enough and you've got a great plan and you bring a lot of desire to it, that you're going to be able to close the gap. That's another myth, because there's a lot of people who've got a lot of will and a lot of talent that gain absolutely no traction on closing the gap. And that's because the gap really is not a void. The gap itself is actually a living, breathing space, and the champion blueprint model that I've created holds that space sacred so that you can gain traction, so that your plan actually can advance itself towards completion. And if that space is not maintained and cultivated, then the potholes that take most people out of the game then become the rule rather than the occasional exception.
And speaking of the potholes in the game that take you out, what have you found to be the biggest potholes that really knock people off track?
Well, I think there's several. Number one, thinking that perfection is necessary to be an extraordinary performer. Number one, waiting to feel fear-free until they take the first action step. Number three, believing that you could do it alone. Number four, believing that if you want it bad enough, it's going to happen. Number three, believing that if you sleep less and work harder, you'll get there better and faster, which also is not true. I mean, there's just a myriad of myths that sound so right in terms of our human nature, but deliver so wrong in terms of the champion's outcome. And that's what my rampage is all about, Dan. It's like I see too many people that are too talented taking themselves out of the game unnecessarily because they believe some of the myths that we've been told or have been repeated so many times we actually take them as doctrine are the very things that prevent us from getting us to where we could potentially go.
Yeah, so let me see if I've got these down. And I know there's more, but the 5 or 6 that you named, one, that perfection is necessary. See, if you're watching right now and listening, do you have this innate belief that perfection is the key to success? Well, Dr. Spencer and I believe that that's not the case, and we're going to prove it to you here by the time we're done, that you have to be fear-free. And what you're saying, Dr. Spencer, is that you can do it with courage and almost do it with wet pants.
well, essentially, yeah, because, I mean, look, Dan, it's like fear is a biologic state of readiness that you absolutely need to be able to put in a transcendent performance. It's actually your friend. And the reality of this is that I've never been around a performer. I've been backstage with U2. I've been with Maria Sharapova. I've been on Richard Branson's island with Joe. And one of the characteristics that we see is that every peak performer that's iconic and mythical that we look up to feels a certain level of fear before they perform at an extraordinary level. And the reality of this is that people that have no fear, they're people that live life way too much in the safe zone.
We're going to cut to a short break, Dr. Spencer. We'll be back with Dr. Jeff Spencer right after this. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com, the show that helps you transform your life, business, and relationships. To summarize the first two segments of the show, we've had Dr. Jeff Spencer talking about the Champion's Blueprint. Dr. Spencer, I have to tell you, I've got like 4 pages of notes here already. And, to summarize what we've been covering, we've been talking a little bit about the 3 things champions do. We've talked about the team, the blueprint and structure, having advisors on our team. Never go at it alone. You need a guide, and avoid the myths. We talked about the 5 main myths. Perfection, the idea that perfection is necessary, that it must be fear-free, and that's where we left off. What would you say to the myth that we must sleep less and work hard, which you touched on a little bit in the last segment?
Yeah, well, first off, if you're going to invest in anything, invest in your sleep, because the cost of an amateurish mental error at the wrong time could be catastrophic. It's one of the fastest ways to throw away a career of preparation and achievement. And the truth is, better, faster visions that are based on better, faster visions of what's possible is really the name of the game. And some of our best revelations that occur to us that you can't really figure out with your intellectual mind just staring at a computer screen any longer always emerge at from a moment of pause in contemplation. So sleep, napping, I'm a big fan of all of those. And the research tells us that the value of that is indispensable in terms of creating not only the best visions possible, but also in terms of extending career longevity.
And speaking of career longevity, there's this myth, like I was brought up in the Midwest, with the blue-collar work ethic. My dad's dad worked, basically as a line worker. My mom's dad worked in the coal mines of West Virginia, literally. And, that work ethic was, basically shared with me. Kid, if you wanted to have success, you've got to be able to outwork, outpace, virtually all your competition. But what you're sharing is a little bit different. And where does the idea of working smart versus hard come in? As you've worked with world-class athletes, you were an Olympic medalist and winner yourself. So talk about that a little bit and honing in on the difference between smart and hard.
Well, I think, again, it goes back to the champion's modus operandi. It's like if we can identify where you are in your path to your achievement, then we kind of know what the dangers are historically, because history tells us what that is, and history doesn't lie. So that allows us to make the best choices to avoid the problem. But in the event that we are running a pattern that will take us off of a cliff, it also shows us what the solution is, which is applying the 1 to 2 things that have to go right to be able to move forward. And if you're clouded because you're tired, you're clouded because you're distracted, you're clouded because you've got battle fatigue, then you neither see the problem nor do you have the reaction times to appropriately either seize opportunity or avoid the pothole. And then, of course, the obvious one is that if you're well rested, you are disciplined, and you know your process, it also allows you to peek around the corner. And again, history is very clear to us. If we can identify where we are, what the next step is going to be, and if we know what that is, then we know what's coming, so we're not taken by surprise. And if you're not rested, then the risk of getting sick at an inopportune time is highly likely. The risk of doing, again, an amateurish mental error at the wrong time is also highly likely. And those are both preventable, and from my view, proactive preparation for that should be part of any responsible executive's or entrepreneur's life in preparation.
And speaking of that preparation, there's this misnomer that, to a degree that to get true success, to get ahead, that it's, this unwritten rule that you've got to be willing to sacrifice. And whether that's called working hard or working harder, or sacrificing on sleep or sacrificing. And you and I have had some, conversations about this at lunches together about, I believe we can have it all. So speak to that and how the Champion's Blueprint really ties in with that.
Yeah, well, I think we have it all, and it's all about pacing and it's about confidence. One of the reasons why people race ahead so fast is that they believe that if they don't capture something now before everybody else, there's not going to be enough slice of the pie to go around. so that prompts them to do things that actually puts them in harm's way. I mean, there's only one Dan Kuschell on the planet and in this creation that is uniquely qualified to do some amazing things. And I feel that that's what it is for each and every one of us. So if we really are confident in, number one, our uniqueness and our ability to craft a vision of a future possibility that's unique to our skill set, and then we have the machinery and infrastructure to be able to systematically achieve that over time where we don't blow ourselves up in the process, which a lot of people do, then we ultimately get to the promised land, but we have functional reserve left in the tank to be able to create even more distinction at a point where we finally got it figured out. How exactly do we become a prolific peak performer? And unfortunately, I see most people blowing themselves up preventably, prematurely, trying to get somewhere too quickly. And once they get there, and once they've maybe sort of got it figured out, they don't have any gas in the tank to be able to extend and build upon that, just at the point where they can create the most significant number and magnitude of successes to create their legacies.
And speaking of those legacies, Dr. Spencer, you talked about the second step as far as a blueprint, right? And having structure. So for our viewers, for our listeners right now, what would be a simple blueprint, simple roadmap or methodology that you could recommend that someone literally could, walk out off the show today and be able to put in place, starting in their business, starting in their career, starting in their life right now?
Well, we could take an element of that. I mean, the Champion's Blueprint, as I've constructed it, is actually an 8-step model that history has revealed to me over the course of 50 years, helping people in all disciplines basically becoming iconic. But to kind of pare this back on the one thing that a person can do to be able to gain predictable acceleration right now in moving forward, I would say that certainly the very first thing that you need to do is to make sure that you've got enough reserve and enough inventory, meaning that you have the intellectual capacity and that you have the skills, and you also have the team, and you've got the time, the resources, the budget, and the equipment and the space that's been vetted even by a third party, to be extremely confident that you have the resources to be able to move forward. Because I see a lot of people prematurely begin processes that they're not, from an inventory perspective, qualified to be able to start, and unnecessarily stall in the process because they run out of resources too quickly. So
and speaking of those resources, Dr. Spencer, what resources have you found that most people need to get in alignment to be able to set their foundation for that accelerated success?
Yeah, well, there's on the personal side, you've got to have your leadership skills down. You've got to be able to command, and you've got to be able to lead the team through thick or thin, again, to the promised land. You have to be able to instill confidence in your teammates that you can actually steer the bus into victory circle. On the material side, you've got to make sure that you have the space, the team, for sure. It's got to be a vetted team that's all committed to the same values. They run at the same altitude. They have the same vision to be able to passionately work together and put the egos aside to be able to arrive in victory circle. You've got to have the right financing, enough of it, to be able to get to where you need to go with at least a 30% cushion, so that the inevitable delays that happen, you don't fall yourself falling victim to. It's also important that you have the personal health, for sure, because if you go down, then everybody goes down, because the bus driver keels over just before they get to the finish line. That's not good either. So it would be, health, it would be space, it would be time, it would be team, it would be material resources, it would be what else? It would be equipment, for sure, and financing would be the key things. And the key thing here, Dan, is that when you're creating your plan, you've got to make sure that you have an independent third party vet the accuracy of your inventory before you go out and get it, and then they vet the inventory once you've gotten it. You need a fresh pair of eyes to look at it like an accountant would look at it, because a lot of people that are smart, they're intelligent, they've got great ambition, they've got a great plan, and unfortunately they stall in process because they just didn't do the vetting of the resources in the inventory.
And speaking of not doing the right vetting, not doing the right resources, you're watching right now, as you're listening, I mean, what would it be worth for you to be able to get all 8 steps of the model of the Champion's Blueprint in place for yourself? What would that do for you? What would that do for your family? What would that do for the team that you might be leading right now? Imagine where you'd be in the next 3 to 5 years, Well, there's nothing we can do about the last 3 to 5 years, but we can certainly start doing something about the next 3 to 5 years. And when we come back, Dr. Jeff Spencer is going to go more in depth about advisors. We're going to also get personal with you as well, Dr. Spencer. I'd love to get your take on like some of the success strategies and hacks you use to be able to build your success too. That and a whole lot more coming up right after. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com, the show that helps you transform your life, business, and relationships. We've got Dr. Jeff Spencer talking about the Champion's Blueprint. We've been talking about 3 things champions do. We've been talking about the 5 common myths. We've been talking about the 3 steps to maximum success. In the last segment here, we've been talking about the power of leadership and the power of having the right material tools in place to set yourself up for maximum success. Now, we promised a gift package for you as well. Would you like to have the ability to be better at influence, better at leadership, being able to go out and double or triple your productivity? Well, we've got a special Growth to Freedom gift package for you that you can get right now. It includes 2 free books. Our book, A Champion in the Making, Awaken the Champion Within Your Life, Business, and Relationships, as well as Walking with the Wise. We've also got our audio program, our video program, a few other surprise bonuses for you as well. When you pick up the phone right now, you'll get this $197 gift package sent to you right away. You can call now at 602-246-3389. That's 602-246-3389. Or visit our website at growthtofreedom.com/gift. That's growthtofreedom.com/gift. Now, Dr. Spencer, you've been talking a lot about the Champion's Blueprint, and what I'd like to do is shift the conversation as it relates to you personally. I mean, you're an overachiever. You've impacted hundreds of thousands of people. You've worked with some of the best athletes, elite athletes in the world. What do you find in all the people that you've worked with that keeps people from getting the true success they deserve?
Well, I think, again, they run their lives on the myths that should deliver. And kind of the biggest myth is, dream big, want it bad enough, try hard, and have a great plan, and it's going to close the gap. And it's a really great idea, but history hasn't proven that really to be the case.
So that movie that I think of when you say that, right, is that movie Build It and They Will Come, right, which is the Field of Dreams movie, right? So what you're saying is that's a bunch of hogwash.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really is, and history supports that. So really, I think the real mistake is that, trying harder is not the name of the game. It's like, do we understand the process? And do we know what steps to take? I mean, the Champion's golden rule is simple. It's do the homework and the test is easy. So really, in the Champion's Blueprint, the first 4 steps that we do in it are all about preparation. Let's make sure that you're prepared to begin your journey so that you vet the goal. We make sure that the goal sort of fits your legacy. We make sure that you know what it's going to take to be able to push through the barriers. We know what those barriers are, and let's make sure that you've got the inventory. And it's like, if you don't have those 4 things, then you're not prepared to start. And don't push the ignition button until you're ready. And most people don't do that. Most people say, well, let's just get started and let's make it up as we go, because the universe is going to fill in the gaps. I mean, another myth, and it doesn't. So, unless we do the preparation, it's not possible to perform. And then in the performance side of things, when we actually do go from rubber bullets in the preparation to the live ammo, where we kind of go boots on the ground, where we open the doors, it's like you got to develop the perseverance to be able to create your breakout performances. You've got to be able to elevate and vet your team. You've got to be able to master the technical skill and be so good at it and evolve it where you can't get it wrong. So ultimately, you play at the top. And in the Champion Blueprint model, the top is not the goal. The top is really only the goal. It's at 9 o'clock. There are 2 steps above the top. There's mastery, and then there's becoming your own champion. So once you get to the top, the trick is, well, how do I stay there? Because there's a lot of people that get there, but what do you do once you get there? How do you stay there? Very few people stay there once they get there. And so unless you know how to adapt to the challenges that you're going to face at the top, which is step 6 in the Champion's Blueprint, then it's not possible to take your technical skill, no matter how good you are. You have to be able to learn to deal with and control the external forces of achievement at the top that'll take you out of the game if you can't adapt to them. And if you've mastered that process, then you still got one more hurdle. That's you and yourself. Can you deal with the internal battle that you're going to face with too much success? And a lot of people can. A lot of people succumb to success intoxication and leave most people scratching their heads like, why did they do that? Didn't they know that this is going to happen, where they threw it away in an instant, a lifetime that they can never get back? Well, no, they actually probably didn't, because they didn't have a corner man that was there that showed them in advance what the problems were going to be before they got there.
Absolutely.
So again,
And speaking of that too, I mean, one of the unique things that I have found in working with all the hundreds of thousands of people I've had a chance to meet over the years, and I want to get your take on it, is this idea that most of us truly down at our core may have had a belief system that says, I fear success. Talk about that a little bit.
well, I think that's true. I mean, fearing success really means, I mean, it's not achieving it, but it's what happens once I get there. Does that mean that that's my new normal? And the expectation is to now transcend that, and every time I have a success, I got to make it bigger, 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 better, 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 better. Well, I mean, if that's the case, then you ultimately mentally talk yourself out of everything because it becomes unattainable. And I don't think that that's true. I think that once you get to the top, you learn to stabilize there. That becomes your new normal. And then you kind of create a new blueprint for then what the next incarnation is going to be, and you do those iterations to it so you progressively engage it. I don't see any reason why, unless you try to make life up by yourself and make it up as you go, but that's not what the Champion Blueprint's all about. It's all about a structure. It's a method that's proven itself to be able to create iterations of yourself, and each one of them get better and better and better. So you create a life of distinction, and you leave an amazing legacy behind that serves as your personal case study, what you did with your time and your talents in this pass through this dimension.
And speaking of this past dimension and leaving a legacy, a life of distinction, a life of meaning, I mean, you've had the incredible fortune to work with so many people and make a difference in so many people's lives. So I'd love for our viewers, for our listeners, to get a true grasp of really what you stand for, Dr. Spencer. What legacy do you want to be known for over the years?
Well, I think that's just an amazing question, Dan, and I really consider that, an amazing honor to be able to answer that. So let me give you the best stab that I can actually give you for, like, my legacy statement. And I would say that I've worked long and hard at this, and this is one of the first places that I generally start with everybody. And so when I look at myself, I want to be known, and I believe that what I am is that I am certainly a thought leader. I mean, there's no question about that. And one of the things that, I want to do as a thought leader is that I want to be able to share with people a proven method that people in all disciplines have used to be able to get to the top of their game and stay there, to create a life of meaning and purpose and contribution and live the lifestyle that they would hope to live. And there's no question about that is my passion. And I've kind of cracked the code on that through my experience. I would also say that the legacy that I would like to live would be to leave. Actually would also be a set of tools and a set of resources that people could refer to be able to make their lives what it can be and create exponential value for themselves and others, so that the legacy that they leave is actually their personally immortal footprint that serves as a case study that other people can follow to create the best life possible for themselves. And that's what my life is dedicated to.
An immortal footprint. Now, that's something you don't hear every day, Dr. Spencer, quite frankly. And obviously, this is what you do and what you bring to the table in contribution. So as you look at your greatest contribution, what would you say is your greatest contribution to this point?
I would say without any reservation, my greatest contribution was the fact that we adopted our daughter from Colombia 6 years ago at the age of 10. And she's now 16 and a half. And to say that if you ever think in a cynical world that what you do and what you say doesn't count, then adopt a kid, and you'll see that they hang on your every word, and that she has gone from one of the most traumatic childhoods I've ever imagined to becoming just an unbelievably gracious and qualified young lady who is going to make a significant contribution to this world. And, we helped support that by creating the environment that allowed her innate talent to be able to flourish and find its way beyond where she came from. So that for sure is the greatest contribution that my wife and I have made to this point. I would say, on a more broad-based scale outside of that is that I've been able to show people a method and a process by which history is revealed that inspires confidence in them, that delivers on the promise of a better life, to be able to create, again, a life of distinction and meaning and purpose. and leave something behind that shows others that a life of elevation and contribution is possible, but you can't make that up. Without a cornerman, without a team, and without a blueprint, it's virtually impossible to be able to create that quality of life.
Absolutely. And speaking of quality of life, Dr. Spencer, as we wrap up here today, where can people go learn more about you, your tools, your services, website? Where can they reach you?
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for that opportunity. It would be www.drjeffspencer.com. That's www.drjeffspencer.com.
So www.drjeffspencer.com. And when they go to your site, what will they find?
Well, they're going to be able to find the tools that the champions in every discipline have followed to be able to create their lives of distinction. First and foremost, they'll be able to find links to be able to attend the workshops that are currently ongoing, and also the online program, in addition to the other services that the Champion Blueprint has dedicated to be able to share with them to be able to achieve the same results for the people that I've already helped get to the victory and the victory circle.
And I want to challenge you, as you're listening or watching right now, go visit Dr. Spencer at www.drjeffspencer.com. Take advantage of his tools, his resources. Dr. Spencer, I want to thank you for being with us today. I know I'm better for it. I think we're better for it. And as you're watching, viewing, I think you're better for it too. Dr. Spencer, thanks for being with us. And that's our show for today at growthtofreedom.com. Now is your time. Take action with what Dr. Spencer has been sharing with you. And we'd love to hear from you. Again, you can hit us up on Twitter at Dan_Kuschell or email us at info@growthtofreedom.com. That's our show for today. Stay tuned next week for more clarity, confidence, and capabilities as we transform your life, business, and relationships. Make it a great week.